Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. On this week's show, I'm asking, what does life look like as a professional sports athlete? Well, to answer this question, I'm joined by Sam Winnall, a professional footballer with a career that spanned 15 years. Having signed his first professional contract as a teenager, he retired at the age of 32, having played for teams such as Wolverhampton Wanderers, Derby County and Sheffield Wednesday. He played in over 300 Football League games and scored over 100 goals. So, let's hear from him now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Well, Sam, it's great to have you on today. Welcome along to the show.
Hi, Richard. It's a pleasure.
Now, in my introduction, I touched upon the fact that I think it's fairly safe to say that over your career, you've been a seasoned professional footballer playing for clubs like Wolves, Sheffield Wednesday, Derby County, amongst others, for over 14, 15 years. For those that perhaps aren't so familiar with your journey, just give us a brief resume and take us across it.
Yeah, I mean, you tick the kind of the bigger clubs that I was involved in over my career. I was fortunate to play for my hometown club, which was Wolves. I grew up in Wolverhampton, and then joined the academy at 11, made my way all the way through, really, all the age groups up until turning professional there, and had a great time there, great footballing education at a really big and well-supported club. It kind of gave me the grounding moving forward to be able to have kind of a longish career within football. But then, like you say, you have to move on, don't you? It's not that fairy tale for everyone to play for the one club for the rest of your career, so moved to Scunthorpe, had real success at Scunthorpe, only 1 year there, but got promoted, had a golden boot win there, which was great. A really good year there. Moved to Barnsley and probably played my best football of my career at Barnsley. Again, have a promotion, won the Johnston's Paint Trophy, amongst scoring quite a few goals, which was nice. And then your kind of career goes, once with the success, your career goes, on a northern trajectory in a way, and moved to Sheffield Wednesday, which was a brilliant move at the time. It didn't really work out for me on the pitch in terms of how much I played and how successful I was, but to be part of like a big football club of Sheffield Wednesday, that I probably underestimated just how big the club was when I first joined. It's a huge club. And then, like I say, I had a loan at Derby as well, which was also another big club. But then once I left there and I'd done my ACL, it was kind of like, you kind of coming towards the end of your career and you can feel that your body can't do what it used to be able to do. And from there it was, trying to scrap to get contracts in a way. I went to Oxford for 2 years, but struggled with fitness and confidence issues, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. And then I finished at Burton Albion, which was my local club at the time. I was living down in the Midlands. Burton Albion, my local club, a brilliant family club, really, full of people from the local community that really try to elevate the club, and it was a brilliant year to finish in a way. But I kind of knew my time was coming to an end. I knew that my body was starting to shut down and not be able to keep up with the demands that professional football asks of it. And I knew that I was going to move in. I was moving on to something else. I was moving on to a second stage of my career and kind of focusing a lot on my education, more than my career. So made the brave decision to retire, and I haven't looked back since. And people say at 32, was it too early, and I can understand the premise, but no, for me it wasn't. I think mentally I was ready, my body was certainly ready. But I look back, on my career with fond memories and regrets, as you can probably imagine, and probably most people do. But it's been a different transition into a completely new realm as such, because you get so wrapped up in the bubble that you're in as a professional sportsman, that when you kind of go into a new environment, it can take some getting used to. But I'm enjoying it.
That's good to hear. And you've touched upon some of the key points in your professional career along the way. And I want to get into this idea of what life as a professional athlete looks like, because just the outline you've given us there is probably very different from what you think it might be if you're a young kid growing up and being a professional athlete in any sport. Not least football. It seems very glamorous at the time. I know I read along the way that you've always said from the age of 4 you dreamt of being a professional footballer, and by the time you're a teenager you sign your first professional contract with Wolves. The reality, though, is it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication. There's diet to think about, there's the routine, there's the commitment. So as a teenager, when you sign that first professional contract, at what point does it all change from the glamorous view a young, naive, impressionable kid growing up has of playing sport to the reality of what pro sports really is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's a 24/7 job. I mean, even in the off season, you're still thinking about, how can I keep myself in the best possible shape? So the first day of pre-season, I'm going back in, ready to go, essentially. And the pre-season games and the pre-season running that you have to do, that's just to kind of get you from 90 to 100 in a way. And it's a shock. I mean, it was always a kind of dream for me to be a professional footballer. It was always kind of what I wanted to do, And I never really kind of imagined myself doing anything else all through school. I did really well in school as well, but that always felt secondary. Homework felt secondary to training, and like weekends of seeing my mates felt secondary to playing for the academy. And it was always my priority. And I think that attitude and that commitment from not just myself, my family, my parents, and everyone around me kind of understood that this was my kind of path. This was my priority. This is what I was kind of dedicating my childhood and my life to. We kind of have to support him on that journey, and that's what everyone around me did. But it does change. I mean, once you become into that professional environment, you start to see how it isn't just exactly what you imagine, especially when you go down the leagues. The League Two is very different from the Premier League, and I think that was the moment where I started to realise what being a professional footballer took. Was probably when I went to Scunthorpe. I'd been released from Wolves after 4 years as a professional, and you're out of contract. And at 22, it's like, I'm out of contract. I haven't got a brilliant amount of brilliant CV at the time, in terms of I hadn't played that many games, I hadn't scored that many goals. So it's like, right, okay, I've got to fight for a contract now. I've got to fight to continue being a footballer. And I was very fortunate. Went to Scunthorpe on trial and offered me a contract for a year. And then you have to perform to pay bills. And as silly as that sounds, it's like that pressure that you've got really can make or break a lot of footballers. That's why you see so many footballers drop out of the game in those years between probably 18 to 23, because the pressure can be quite difficult to kind of navigate. And I was very fortunate that I went to Scunthorpe. It was the right environment for me at the right time, surrounded by the right players, a nice blend of experience. Like, I was the youngest pretty much in the team at 23, and we had a wealth of experience ranging from senior pros who were 35, 36, who were coming towards the end of the career, that could give me guidance and kind of help me understand how the game works. Because I think when you're at a big club like I was at Wolves, in the under 21s or in the under 18s, you are cotton walled a little bit. But then once you go into the man's football of like I say, into League Two, which was where Scunthorpe were at the time, it makes you realise what it takes to be able to kind of have longevity within the game. And I always say that year was a really pivotal year for me, because it could have gone one way or the other. If I hadn't have had success at Scunthorpe and did what I did, who knows where I would have ended up. But obviously having, going in, starting the first game of the season, scoring on my debut, it just seemed as if everything from there went really, really well. And it kind of gave me that, as I said earlier, that grounding to go on to have a career in football.
How did you handle that pressure? Because, as you say, you've started at Wolves, this big club, great tradition, rich history. It hasn't worked out for you, and suddenly you're no longer at Molineux. You're playing at Glanford Park with Scunthorpe United, and you realise at the age of 22 that if you want to stay in professional football, there's no second chances here. It's now or never. That will, to a lot of people in the modern day and age, will seem like a lot of pressure to handle on relatively young shoulders, and very different to the conception that sport is fun. It's there to be enjoyed.
Yeah, and I mean, there is part of that. I mean, I think you do need to try and enjoy your job, and it is your job, essentially. You know, it's not just a hobby, it's what pays your bills. And there is a level of that, having to try and enjoy it. But again, there's the other side of it of, like I just said, is having to perform to pay your bills. I mean, that summer I went on a day's trial at Bury and didn't get anything at Bury. Went on trial to Crewe, and you know, although I like the people there, and the people like me wasn't able to kind of get a contract sorted for myself, so I had to go to Scunthorpe. And I think actually seeing what that was like, being out of career, and actually thinking, well, you know, I'm out of contract here, I could not be a footballer, and I've put all my eggs in this basket. That fear that kind of like gave me kind of made me realise, like, I have to really work hard here, and I have to take the very few chances that I'm going to get. And thankfully I did that at Scunthorpe. But again, I think it was suited to my personality. I quite liked that pressure, probably needed that kick up the bum, if I'm going to be totally honest, of saying, like, look, this is a very delicate industry, in the sense that you can be out of it within the blink of an eye. So to be able to stay in it, you've got to really give everything to stay there, and that's what I did that year. You know, I dedicated my whole life. Everything else came secondary to performing for Scunthorpe and for myself, because I knew that, you know, if after a year's time of being at Scunthorpe, if I'm out of contract again and it hasn't worked out there, you know, where am I going to be then, and where am I going to be looking at in terms of going on trial then? So yeah, it was a tough time. I'm not going to say tough, I'm going to say challenging time, but one that I felt, you know, I navigated and I dealt with pretty well.
Well, it was one you rose to because you averaged a goal every other game, basically, and played well enough for Barnsley to come knocking on your door. And again, having helped Barnsley's promotion, Sheffield Wednesday came knocking on your door. You talked at the very start of this conversation about things taking an upward turn in your career. Because of that initial experience of being let go by Wolves and playing at Scunthorpe, do you think that put you in a good stead, if you like, when Barnsley and Sheffield Wednesday came knocking? And did you appreciate those opportunities more because of how your career started?
Yeah, probably. I think because of that kind of humbling that you have in terms of that first time anyone says, look, we're not going to renew your contract, like, you will be leaving us at the end of the season. That does kind of bring you back down to earth a little bit and make you realise just how lucky you are to kind of be a professional footballer. And I think having that experience of having to kind of go away and really think about how much do I want this career and how much do I want to succeed within this industry. From then on, and it was like, it makes you appreciate that this is very delicate. Like, this could be taken away from me at any point. So if I take my foot off the gas, if I kind of take my eye off the game, you know, it'll be gone. And, you know, I think when I went to Barnsley especially, it was like, I've succeeded at Scunthorpe, but it did feel as if, like, right, I've got to prove myself again now. It's another level up. It's another club that's bigger again. It's more money as well, which comes into play as well. So it's like, right, I've got to go again. And all that kind of equity that I've built up at Scunthorpe, and I've kind of put a name out there for myself. It's like, I don't want to just be a one-season wonder as such. I want to, okay, right, well, I want to say this is who I am. I'm a goal scorer. I'm somebody that can, you know, change games. So that's the way I felt. And that's the way it kind of started for me as well, because I went to Barnsley, and although I was kind of the number 9 and I was brought in as the main striker, I lost my place in the side for probably 5-6 games due to I hadn't really probably started that well. I'd had an average or so start. lost my place in the side, and I think that made me realise, right, now I've got to turn it up a notch here. I can't just be okay. I need to be the main man. And from there, the rest was history really for the next kind of 2 years that I was there. I had brilliant time, probably reached the peak of my personal performances, definitely in terms of my goal scoring capabilities, and had some great times and some great successes.
Yeah, and as you say, that doesn't just happen overnight. You've got to dedicate yourself to it and focus yourself. And that comes down to diet, it comes down to routine, it comes down to training. So for those that perhaps don't really know what a typical day in the life of a footballer during the season looks like, walk us through it. How does it start and how does it end?
I think it's different. I do think it's quite different for everybody. I mean, I can only speak from experience. I didn't have kids whilst I was playing football for the majority of my career, so I think that adds another layer into the equation of what it's like to try and be a footballer, trying to juggle being a parent alongside being a professional sports person. But for me, it was wake up. Depending on where I was and what my commute was, I'd normally order myself an hour. So it was, say if I had to be in at 9:30, depending on where it was, I'd give myself an hour of getting myself ready, waking up, having a coffee, getting myself to the training ground, having breakfast at the training ground normally. I wouldn't really have breakfast at home, I'd just get in the car and go. From then, have breakfast, you go into the gym, so you do your pre-activation, you do your kind of like getting your body ready for a day of training. Do any kind of specifics that you need to do, whether it be like ankle kind of proprioception that I had to do a lot of because I had quite weak ankles, glass ankles I used to say, or kind of knee rehabilitation from dealing with 2 ACLs. You have to keep on top of that because you don't want to do that again. So it was kind of just going through that again. It was quite a routine for me. I'd go into the gym and I'd do the same thing every morning. I'd do my ankle proprioception, do my knee rehab, and then I'd just do something to get my muscles firing. And then it's time for training. Go out, train. Normally between, shortest session is probably 45 minutes. Longest session you do is probably 2 hours on a Tuesday, potentially, if you've got no midweek game. Come in, straight away eat, you refuel. I think you'll have probably had so many people on the podcast talking about the importance of refueling straight after a session or a game. It is pivotal, and you can definitely tell the difference. Even if it's the space of kind of like an hour that you leave it from after training to time to when you refuel, you can definitely tell the difference. You kind of feel a little bit sluggish. And then it sounds silly, then you either go in the gym and do a little bit of extra, maybe some like leg work or some upper body work, or you go home and people kind of can't wrap their head around that most sports people are home by 2-3 o'clock most days. And although that sounds amazing and it is nice to be able to be home, you are extremely tired because you've had like a full day of exerting your body to kind of the max a lot of the time, especially in the middle of the week, in Tuesday and Thursdays. So then it's normally time for a nap, and then I'd go and have like kind of 45 minutes sleep on the sofa, just get something rubbish on the TV that I can kind of switch off to, have 45 minutes sleep, and then kind of recover, wake up, do anything I need to do around the house, and then it's kind of eat healthily, hydrate all day, so you're kind of constantly trying to take little sips of water, and eating kind of what your body needs. And that's another thing, like you eat depending on what day it is of the week. I mean, I don't know, again, you've probably had people on the podcast that spoke about like match day -1, match day -2, or match day +1. In terms of your food and your intake that you actually take depends on where you are in relative to the game, when the game's coming up, if it's a Saturday. So what you eat on a Tuesday is very different to what you'd eat on a Friday.
Is the diet strict throughout the week, or is there an allowance that you can afford yourself to have some of the nice things, binge food, if you like, that we just take for granted and enjoy as non-professional athletes?
Yeah, there has to be, because I think, especially coming from somebody who's a bit of a foodie, I couldn't have been 100% strict on a diet. I enjoy food. and I always wanted to kind of enjoy my food at the right time. So, like you say, I mean, a Saturday after a game, when you haven't got a game for the next few days or whatever, it was go nuts. You've just exerted your body to the absolute maximum. Sometimes you lose a lot of water weight throughout a game, so it's like go nuts, go and eat whatever you want. This is the time to do it and enjoy your food. But yeah, you kind of learn what works for you, and you know how much food you need, and that comes with experience and guidance as well, especially from nutritionists at clubs. But you kind of start to learn to when you can do that and when you can't do that. If you were to go and binge on a Friday, you knew that on the Saturday you'd be sluggish. So your performance and kind of that would be your motivation to eat well, is just thinking, well, okay, yes, this is a sacrifice. I can't just go and eat what I want, but it's all geared towards giving myself the best chance of performing on match day.
And when you look back now at your career, given what you've said, it's all about knowing your body, knowing yourself, and what works for you all feeds into this daily routine. When you look back now, if you could talk to your younger self, would there be some advice you'd give yourself, something you'd change or encourage even?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think for me it would be to work more on the mental side of the game, and kind of not take it for granted, and really work with somebody. I think that's something that, I don't know how much you know, but in terms of what I'm doing now, in terms of my mentoring with footballers and different sports people, that's the big thing that I'm trying to encourage is to really work on your mental side of the game with somebody that kind of knows what they're talking about, is experienced within the sporting industry, that can really support.
Does that relate purely to the actual performing in your chosen sport, or does that include all the external pressures that come in an era when social media dominates, everybody's got an opinion and seemingly can offer it?
I think the two are linked, if I'm going to be totally honest. I think a happy and content player is a good player and plays better. If a player's carrying the weight of that pressure that you've just described of social media and the external kind of things that come with being a sports person, it is going to affect performance. And I think that's now, more as the kind of sporting industry is starting to kind of warm to that idea, I think it's more important now than ever to be really on top of the mental side of what comes with being a sports person, to promote and maintain consistent performance. And I mean, I look at that on myself. I think the times where I probably needed the most mental support was the times where I probably struggled with form, and the times when I didn't really need that mental support was the times that I played really well. So, I think I can only speak from my own experience. That's probably what I would have always said to aspiring footballers now, but also said to myself going back if I had a conversation with a 22-year-old Sam.
You played over 300 league games across your career, scored over 100 goals, played for a number of clubs. As you look back now, what was the highlight? What was the standout moments, if you will? There was lots, if I'm honest. I think the big ones for me were always goals, and it probably selfish striker speaking, but that's always what kind of got the hairs raised on the back of my neck. Wins were great, and it brought camaraderie, and I was lucky to have 2 wins at Wembley, and 2 promotions in there as well, and lots of good times from a team perspective. But the thing that really kind of got my juices flowing was goals, and there was a couple of scoring. To be honest, scoring on my debut for Scunthorpe was a big moment for me, because that took a lot of that pressure away from me. Scoring in the playoffs for Barnsley as well was also highlights. But then, I had some really good times at Sheffield Wednesday, scoring my first goal for Sheffield Wednesday at home to Birmingham, scoring for Derby away at Leeds. I got a brace at Ellen Road to win the game, and all of the moments for me that I look back and I really kind of look back with pleasure were always the goals that I scored and the importance of the ones that I scored. And that's what I miss now. I don't miss. There's so much of the being a footballer that I don't miss, like, at all. Don't miss the training. Don't miss
the scheduling or the routine or the sacrifices and the discipline that it takes. I don't really miss that, but I really do miss, the feeling of scoring a goal, because nothing compares to it. And that's all I ever wanted to do when I was a child, was just score goals. I was a striker from the age of, like I say, 4 when I first started. My dad said to me, just go and stand by their goal, and when the ball comes to you, just kick it in. And I think that was something...
It's a simple game, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's something that stuck with me for the next, 30 years as such. So, I really do miss that. That was the part of the game that always kept me coming back, always made me want to, try and improve, try and play more games, try and, get myself to a place where I'm giving myself the best position to score goals, because that feeling that it gives you, it's irreplaceable.
How much do you miss the competition on game days? Because I know post-football now you've knuckled down it and started getting heavily into your golf. Does that weigh into it, just being able to have that competitive edge, that spirit of competition?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even from training, that's the part of training essentially that was the best part for me as well, was the competition with your other teammates. It was that playing in 5-a-sides and just wanting to win. And you do lose that. That's something for the next probably the first 6 months after I decided to retire. That was something I really struggled with, was not having something to be competitive with. Not even with somebody else, with myself, like wanting to I had nothing that was driving me to want to improve, wanting to practice something. And as you mentioned, you then get golf, and obviously I'm now looking at golf as something of my way of being competitive, not just with other people, but with myself. I want to constantly try and improve, and I play a lot of paddle as well, and that's a really great way of being competitive from a team aspect as well, because you're in a duo, you're in a partnership, and so you're trying to be competitive, but with a teammate as well. And I think that's something that I definitely miss, but I'm starting to understand that it's a part of me I need. I need something to be competitive about, to keep my my mental state in a good place, and thankfully I'm lucky that my body is still allowing me to play paddle, to play golf, to play the occasional 5-a-side with my friends as well, which is nice and keeps those, like you say, those competitive juices flowing.
Outside of the professional arena, they do say it's the taking part that counts, Sam.
I've never been one who could get on board with that. It's all about winning for me. Yeah. No, like I say, I think it's just so heavily ingrained into you as a sports person that you don't lose it. It's an everyday. Like I say, from the age of 4, it was every single day for me was football, football, football. So it's near impossible to try and lose that edge and that competitiveness that you have. I mean, people used to laugh at me in school because I'd just get it in everything. In anything where it was PE, I'd always want to be competitive. I'd always want to win. And I hated losing. I still do to this day. I hate losing, but I think that's a part of me that, will never change, and I would never change either.
Well, seemingly it isn't changing, because I know recently on the golf course you shot a gross 2 under par 68. So the golf is going well. So congratulations on that front. Listen, it's been a fascinating conversation, and great to have your insight into what it takes to be a professional athlete. For those that have enjoyed this conversation on social media, where can they keep across everything that you're doing and stay in touch with life outside of football?
Yeah, so I'm not on many socials. I am on LinkedIn, and obviously that's my name, Sam Winnall. Potentially might be coming back to Instagram shortly in terms of what I'm looking to do next, in terms of trying to promote myself in my next career. But yeah, best place to find me is LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been great having you on the podcast this week. We thank you for your time and wish you all the best going forward.
Cheers. Thank you, Richard. Top man.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Many thanks to Sam Winnall for joining me this week and taking us inside the world of a professional sports athlete. And if you're interested by some of the things he had to say and want to find out more, you can do so by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. If you've particularly enjoyed this episode, please do feel free to share it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. Remember, the more downloads we can get, the easier it then becomes for us in future to attract top-name athletes or experts at the cutting edge of their field. Well, that is just about all for this edition. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to the next time I can speak to you on the Science for Sport podcast.